Hello and welcome back to the garden and back to the white garden. And I thought I would give you a tour of what this garden looks like in midsummer. Obviously these two borders either side of the path here are new this year, so they're not as good as what they will be hopefully in the future. But at least you get a feel of the type of planting that I'm going for. I'm not really one for very neat borders, as you probably know if you watch my videos. I like very blousy plants. Planting that is cheek by jowl, falls into each other. I don't like anything too neat, too prim and proper. It's not my style. However, you might get ideas for your own garden from little pieces of this border, or this garden as such. So, what have I got to add today? Let me go and get the plants and I'll tell you all about them. So the plant that I've chose to add to the back of this border is a Thalictrum, and this is splendid white. Let me grab the camera and bring you in a bit closer so you can actually see it. This is a close-up of the Thalictrum flowers, very pretty, very delicate, but it does grow into a substantial perennial. Comes back every year, likes sun to partial shade, moist ground, doesn't like to dry out too much. And it grows anything from 5 to 6 feet. Very fine cut leaves, very delicate leaves too, but it's very pretty. I've grown these myself, so this one's probably the best example, but I've got about 5 or 6 to add, and let me show you where I'm going to add them to. That lovely bee on the Veronicastrum there. It's enjoying those flowers. But this is all newly planted, so they should fit in lovely, just more or less at the back of this border in this ground here. A little bit awkward to film here, but this ground's quite nice, so I think they should do well. And I'm not really adding anything to the planting hole either, because I added a lot of good compost just a couple of months ago when I started this new border. Now I have added a stake in here, a couple of stakes actually, because that's one thing to note. These do often require staking, Thalictrums, because they grow lovely roots on that. I don't know if you could see, it doesn't really need teasing out that at all. They do grow that big, that tall, and if it's in a windy spot they can get torn apart by winds, so that's just something to be mindful of, that you probably will need to stake it depending on where you've got it. If you've got it somewhere sheltered, it'll be fine, but if it's somewhere where it attracts or can attract a lot of wind, or suffer rather from a lot of wind, you probably need to stake it. Very hard for you to see, but that's 3 Thalictrum added. Just giving these all a bit of a water. Only thing to add is that they flower from June onwards. The next plant that I'm going to add is this one, and this is Veronica. No, it's not. It's Veronicastrum album, and I love this particular perennial next to the Annabelle hydrangea. You have the tall flower spikes, and each stem has quite a few flower spikes on it. Once this main one is finished, these smaller ones take over. So way back in March, I dug this clump up and divided it, and I removed several small sections which I potted up, and that's what these are. And I have about 3 or 4 of them, and I'm going to add them to the top borders where I added the new hydrangeas, because I think they'll look lovely there in a couple of years' time. To get a clump this size, it did take about 3 to 4 years. So as you can see, height-wise, anything up to about 5 feet. And it's a little bit lower this year because of the dry spring we've had. Spread, again, anything up to 3 feet. Could be even larger depending on how old and how established the actual clump is. So let's go up to the top border now and we'll add these plants. Now it's hard to get a good video shot of this because it's such a tight space. But basically, what this plant requires, this perennial, is pretty much like the Thalictrum, which I planted on the other side. Sun to partial shade, moist soil, doesn't like to dry out, exactly like the Thalictrum. So it's very similar. What I've got in the front here are delphiniums, several delphiniums, which have now been cut back. They'll not reappear for this year. They may grow some new leaves, but they won't reflower because obviously I've just planted them in the new perennials. So we won't see the best of this area until next year. If you have a windy garden like me, or you're gardening under deciduous trees also like me, these borders only receive sunshine for about 4 hours maximum per day, 4 to 5. And a lot of the taller perennials and annuals like these, cosmos, they do lean towards the light. What I try to do is in the spring remember to add these growing frames. Just place them over the emerging perennial around about April time. By mid-May, normally they're covered and you can't see them. It just means that if you have a windy spot, this time of year, you've got lovely straight perennials in the border, like the Veronicastrum that I showed you earlier. Not like the phloxes, which I forgot to stake and are now falling over. So in an earlier video, I think it was March, April time, here in the white garden, I took some hydrangea hardwood cuttings. These are the Annabelles, which you can see behind me. Now I don't normally do hardwood cuttings. It was the first time. I normally take softwood cuttings of Annabelles in the summer. But some of them I can see haven't survived. There's a one here which has nothing growing on it, but let me turn it out and see if it's got any roots. And that took some doing, and it has, each one, hopefully, this one here, you can see that's nothing on it, it's pretty dead, but all of these have got young roots. I'm just going to gently break them apart and then I'm going to pot them up, and hopefully, one that hasn't taken, hopefully in a year or two, there you go. How good is that? It's growing from the bottom and the top. So hopefully in a year or two I'll have more of these Annabelle hydrangeas. I would say the success rate was just over 50%. I started off with 8 and I've got 1, 2, 3, I've got 5. So that's not bad. I'm pleased with that. I have enough now to start another white garden. No matter how good I think I've planned the succession planting in the borders here in the white garden, it never works out as much as I'd hoped it would. I always have gaps this time of year. We're heading towards the end of July, midsummer, and I do need to fill in quite a few places in the borders. And what I grow every year from seed, and I grew these from seed last year, so they're now ready to plant out this year, are some perennials, and the echinacea, and this is white swan. And unfortunately in my garden I have to treat these as an annual. They do not return year on year. I think the ground here is too wet and it's never hot enough. It's shaded for quite a portion of the day. So because I love them, I still persist and grow them, and I treat them as an annual. So I'm going to plant them here and around and about, all throughout the borders. Or I may add them to a pot because they're so pretty. I also grow the purple variety and I add these to the hot border, and these again were off last year. I've got quite a few of these, they're just starting to flower. Also, I add tubers of dahlias. Again, I used to leave them in the ground, but the last 3 or 4 years have such wet winters and wet springs, with the exception of this year, it's been very dry. Anyhow, the tubers, again, they just rot. So I grow quite a few white dahlias too, just to fill in those spots, or in a pot if I can't find anywhere to plant them, just to keep the succession planting going into autumn. So that's what I'm going to do next, but you'll see it on another video. So I'd just like to say thanks for watching. Hope you've enjoyed this episode in the white garden, and I'll see you very soon.